Folks, at this time, if I could have your attention, I would like to invite Meg Chittenden up on stage with me, who's going to talk to you a little bit about the organization, and then we're going to do a Fund the Need, and then you'll have the highlight of the evening when Mr. Stephen Wright comes up.
Thank you, Mike. My big brother, Abram, who I've always called by his middle name, Charlie, has Asperger's syndrome. And tonight, I want to share with you our story, a story that may in some ways remind you of your own. It's a story of a family striving to make sense of a child's difficulties and to help him to grow and be his best self. Charlie, where are you, Charlie? There he is. Charlie is one of my favorite people in the world. He's 3 years older than I am, but we were 1 year apart in school, and we've always been very close. When we were kids, we played together constantly, and later, he was the person that I went to have those big discussions about life, God, and the world, you know? I knew that whatever was on my mind, I could go to him, and he would consider it with me seriously without any kind of judgment. No matter what I've done in my life, Charlie has always supported me wholeheartedly. When I was a 16-year-old exchange student in Switzerland, my brother Charlie sent me money in the mail sometimes because he said that he thought that I could probably use it more than he could. How many teenage boys do you know would do that for their little sister? I love Charlie so deeply, and it's been hard to see him face so many challenges throughout his life. Charlie and I grew up in a small town in a time before Asperger's was widely recognized, and sometimes I wonder what it would have been like for us if we had had the information and the resources that we now have thanks to AANE when Charlie was growing up. But as it was, his perplexing amalgam of gifts and challenges remained a mystery to us. And I feel like now in retrospect, given what we know now about Asperger's, the diagnosis would have been fairly obvious, but we'll see what you think. So Charlie has been with me from the beginning, literally from the beginning. He was there when I was born. And I'm told that the next day when people asked him what he thought of this miracle of birth and of his new baby sister, he said, well, someone has a lot of laundry to do. Which was an astute observation for a 3-year-old, but might have been in some ways a preview of Charlie's tendency to focus more on facts than on feelings, if you know what I mean. Charlie has always been extremely bright and articulate. Even so, school proved to be challenging for him. He did all right in the Montessori school that we attended until he was 8 years old. But then we moved to a new state and we enrolled in a more conformity-oriented public school. And within the first week at our new school, Charlie had been sent to the principal's office because apparently the teacher had seen him daydreaming at his desk and had come over and said, "Are you going to do your work or just sit there?" Now, Charlie thought in true Asperger's style, he understood the words, but not necessarily the tone, so he actually thought she was giving him a choice. So he considered it, and he said, I think I'll just sit here. And, you know, was then surprised to find himself in the principal's office. You can imagine how confusing that was for a second grader. So similar misunderstandings with teachers continued to plague his early schooling years. He has always had very intense special interests. One could maybe call them obsessions. And one such interest when we were still in elementary school was genealogy. He was totally captivated, particularly by our Scottish heritage. And this led to a particularly painful period in my own childhood in which I was forced to endure the exquisitely excruciating squawk of poorly played bagpipes through the thin wall between our rooms. It was hard, but luckily that was a short-lived time. But he also memorized the plaid of every single clan. He made a wall-sized chart of of all the different Scottish monarchies throughout time. He experimented with haggis, which if you don't know what that is, you don't want to know. Yeah. And he also would perform all 87 verses of the ballad, The Battle of Bannockburn, for anyone who would listen, which, as you can imagine, it was a pretty select audience. But I think, by like verse 79, it started to thin out. That's great. But it was impressive, good memory. His eccentric interests, combined with the didactic way in which he was sometimes prone to pontificate on his interests, did not necessarily always endear him to his peers. And as we moved into our middle school years, his difficulty forming positive social connections became more pronounced. Now, some people might have just turned to intellectual pursuits altogether, but Charlie is by no means misanthropic. Despite his social challenges, he's always been very interested in and concerned with the people around him. And so he found less conventional ways to engage in the social posturing that takes up so much of a middle schooler's consciousness. For example, he took up journalism. He would arrive at the middle school dances equipped with a notebook and a pen, and rather than standing self-consciously against the wall alone during slow dances, Charlie would work his way through all the couples, meticulously documenting who was dancing with who for every dance. Then he'd take this home and he'd synthesize the information and create some spreadsheets and some graphs and bring those into school on Monday. And he did get a fair amount of attention for this work, but I can't say that it was really altogether positive attention. And that was around the time when I started to hear a refrain that became all too familiar during our school years together. Your brother is like so weird. It always surprised me how many people felt like that was a good conversation starter with me. Like, where do you go from there? Yeah, the weather is really nice, thanks. I don't know. Anyway, Charlie has also always loved a good argument. Not like a heated emotional rant, but a cool, efficient, but merciless verbal sparring. That's what he's into. And I have to say, as his little sister, this hasn't always been enjoyable for me. But and one thing that it's taken me my whole life to fully grasp, and I still sometimes forget, is that Charlie is perfectly happy to argue a position that he himself does not hold. And this is another trait that hasn't actually always served him well. In high school, his freshman year Latin teacher was a staunch feminist, and Charlie himself is a feminist. However, this did not stop him from engaging her in what he would have called lively debate around which sex was superior. And I guess once after a particularly heated exchange on this topic, she demanded that he write her a letter of apology. And this he did. And it was very gracious and remorseful. The trouble was that if you read the first letter of each sentence going down, it spelled out women are inferior. Yeah. He assured me that she was going to find this just as clever and funny as he did. He was wrong. After high school, Charlie tried to make it work at various different colleges, but it never seemed to quite work out for him. And it was almost as though the more independent he became, the more crises he seemed to face. By that time, he had developed a keen interest in computer programming, and he usually had some kind of computer programming project underway on his own. And often when he had such a project underway, he would neglect to do some of the kind of basic things necessary for daily life, like, eating, sleeping, paying bills, taking out the trash, going to work, just, details like that were hard for him to manage. So as a result, he got and lost a series of jobs. He was married, he was divorced, he even ran into some pretty serious legal trouble. He needed that card that Brenda was talking about, that would have really come in handy. And as our family rallied around him again and again to help him through yet another crisis, it all started to feel strangely predictable, yet at the same time utterly confounding. Here was Charlie, this brilliant, loving, talented, kind young man trying to make it in the world on his own, yet sliding 3 steps back for every 1 step forward. He'd been assessed by various professionals since he was a teenager. He'd been diagnosed with this and that, medicated, chastised, encouraged, but nothing seemed to help. Things went from bad to worse for him, and it got to a point where we didn't know where else to turn. Finally, when Charlie was 32 years old, someone suggested that he might have Asperger's syndrome. And that is when we found AANE. Through AANE, we were able to get an accurate diagnosis and to start down the road towards developing a true understanding of Charlie's challenges. The people of AANE have truly become like a surrogate family for him. They offer him the same kind of unconditional love and support that a family offers. And what's more, they've helped all of us to be able to find the resources and the information that we need to be effective in approaching the challenges associated with Asperger's. They've helped Charlie find consistent work that builds on his strengths. They've encouraged him to develop his incredible artistic abilities. And perhaps best of all, they've connected him with other people who enjoy arguing for the sake of argument as much as he does, which has been wonderful. In all seriousness, it feels like now at last, through AANE, Charlie finally has this social network, this supportive social network that seemed to elude him throughout most of his life. And now he steps out into the world with such confidence that the same little boy who used to run into an alley and hide rather than risk having to converse with someone on the street can now form lasting friendships with strangers that he meets on the train. It's an amazing transformation, and we thank AANE. In closing, I'll just say briefly, my husband and I are blessed to be the parents of a wonderful baby boy who is just a few months shy of his first birthday. And I have no idea what the future holds for him. But when I look down at his beautiful sleeping face, and I wonder about what joys and challenges lie ahead for him, it gives me great comfort to know that AANE is out there helping to support children and families who are navigating the ups and downs of growing up with Asperger's. Thank you. Thank you.